but we're going live. Hey, we're live. Cool.
Awesome.
Get this guy showing up here. How is everybody doing out there? See a few people in the comments already.
Nice.
Do MA3 cloning. Oof. Hard no on my end. I've hardly touched MA3.
Yeah, same. It's I figured like at least the next few tours I'm still gonna be on MA2. I mean, just got the damn thing, so not really
Oh,
in a great
really?
one.
Is that
I'm not in a
a
great
new toy there?
Yeah, it was I picked it up actually during quarantine because people started selling them.
Okay, yeah. I
Um,
mean, yeah.
yeah, I mean the way I saw it is just like, yeah, I could save for ages and get a 3, or I could get one now whilst they're really cheap and um, unlock parameters and have previews in my house. So that's what I did.
Yep. Only
But yeah, I
thing
feel
of...
like
No, go
until
ahead.
MA3 does something that MA2 doesn't, I'm not really interested in
Yeah,
spending too much time digging.
it's got some cool stuff in it. Like, I mean, I'm interested to see how phasers work. I'm interested in the way
Yeah.
that groups now work. But it's also one of those, like, the way they've redone groups, like, kind of screws up the way I'm used to working with groups. So I've got to relearn that, completely relearning effects. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I don't think we're in danger of not being able to get an MA2 or a 3 in mode 2 for a
Yeah, I
while.
think we're safe.
You know, so maybe I'll eat those words when I can't get one in a year or something. We'll see.
I tried getting like deep into like the MA3 Lua stuff because they expanded the engine to do a ton, but also there's just like nothing to use a 3 specifically on at the moment as far as like anything I've been doing, so it's kind of hard to just spend hours working on something that's like going to be something when shows exist again.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Pop out chat. That's what I was looking for. So I
Yeah,
can
that
just have.
guy.
There we go. That guy.
Oh boy. Is this stream coming through at 360 for everybody?
What? That's not gonna work.
No, that's not what I'm sending it at all.
I don't think it is. Let me try it on this.
Maybe it's because of all the bandwidth I'm eating up right now. Although I'm on gigabit, that shouldn't be a concern. Okay, people are saying 1080. Yeah, my settings are maxed out at 360 right now. But, I mean, we've got what, the call coming in from you, then OBS going out to this, and then YouTube feeding it back to me, so.
And some fun NDI stuff.
Yeah, on top of all the internal networking on both ends.
Yeah. It's a miracle it's working as well as it is.
Oh, the streaming stuff's been great because honestly, I just never used NDI prior to these. Just I hadn't run into situations of needing it, so I didn't realize it was going to be as
It's
stupidly straightforward as it is.
it's super handy for previews as well. So if you
Yeah,
have visual content to throw in there, like the only thing I've found with a bunch of the visualizers is they'll just take all of the NDI. So even if you're only wanting to use one screen, but you're configured to send 4 or 5 for some reason, it's gonna record all of them when you record your stuff.
yeah,
Like Capture does that anyway, I found.
yeah. Sounds about right. L8 has actually got a pretty handy client for it, where you can pick which one's streaming to which like NDI input for the program. I just
Nice.
upgraded my license with them to to handle that.
Cool.
So it's been handy. Looking at the clock, I think we're gonna wait another 5 here. Just checking the viewer count. God, I've been watching like just shows on the side while I've been coding stuff lately, and it's been a bunch of Nine Inch Nails stuff. So I've got nothing but their music playing in my head right now.
Nice.
Just synth lines for days.
Yeah, I've been on a weird 80s kick.
Yeah.
It's been all kinds of stuff. Just, I don't know. If you walk past our house and just hear, like, I don't know, you hear different music every day. Just like, we'll be on, I don't know, tear out drum and bass one day and then 80s power ballads the next.
Sure.
Like, it's pretty fun.
Do you you have any info for that game you're working on? Do you want to do a shameless plug on?
I kind of don't want to plug it until it's
That's
finished.
fair,
It's
that's
been a
fair.
side project because, yeah, I mean, it's very much a side project for me. It's a game that my housemate and I have been. I'm pointing as if he's here, but he definitely isn't. It's been working on during quarantine. Like I'm fairly lucky. I'm still employed during COVID because I work for an artist right now. But
Oh, nice.
in my spare time and in Luke's all time, is we've just been working on a game project, and kind of fun. We started with no expectations, and now we have something that's released on iOS and Android, and could actually become a thing. So again, we're not really sort of pinning too many hopes on it. It's just like it was a fun thing to do.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've got a buddy of mine. We're looking into writing a game in C#, just like you said, like a side project, just for fun, just to do something else with code besides just work.
Yeah, for sure. I really did like learning C#. It was great. I think it's been like I've learned so much, not even just about C#, but about the entire game design process that
Yeah.
I didn't even think was on the radar for me to do this year. Like I don't think anybody's year is exactly gone to plan, but
No.
having a game released on the App Store is not really something I thought was on the cards for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
this year.
pretty cool little something to be able to say.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so I looked after the code side of it. My housemate who works in 3D animation, he looks after all the side of it. And there's been sort of weekends and evenings where we've both been respectively tearing hair out, just trying to make something work. And recently it's been Android, but finally got a build of that a few days ago. So yeah, it's been a fun little excursion.
Yeah.
It's been weird. So the last few days, just getting back into these show files and stuff, because this is all my stuff from beginning of this year, end of last year.
Right.
And it's kind of maybe been about 6 months since I looked at any of it, because I started designing a new show, and that's kind of when I thought, let's tear everything that's good out of this and make a new thing. Unfortunately, I can't show that today because it's a project that's still pending and designs that haven't been finalized or shown to the world yet.
Yeah.
Whereas this show's been around the world and shown a few times and a few different iterations. And yeah, I'm fairly happy to disclose. I'm good with secrets anyway. I don't really keep any. It's like anybody asks me anything about it, I'll tell them exactly how it's done, because I learned it all from videos on the internet as well. And
Right.
other people's show files and people telling me things. So I'm not particularly secretive or anything about the stuff in the files, but it's like anything that hasn't happened yet, I kind of want to keep under wraps.
Sure. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're pretty close to our 5 after mark, so I think we're good to go ahead and dive into this. For everybody who's already on the stream, hello. Today we're going through Mr. Chris Thoms' show file over here, or his cloning process. He's been in the industry for about 20 years. Prior to the world shutting down, was working for artists like Duke Dumont, Alesso, Alice in Wonderland, Just generally doing house techno, EDM, that kind of world, to my understanding. We got to have a little bit of a chat yesterday, just setting this up. He is fantastically nerdy in the best way possible. And personally, I'm looking like not just to hype this up, like I'm actually looking forward to seeing what we're gonna see here. So I'm gonna shut up and just
Me too.
pass it off to him.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in and for being interested in this process a bit. So I'll just show you my MA2 layout to start with. So I think a good place to start with this is how this file came to be and why it is the way it is. So it started off as just a punt file with, wait a second, let me just switch it to my full punt file, full size. Oh, wait. All right, so I wanted to make it as simple as possible. I know it kind of looks a little bit complicated here, but I wanted to remove the possibility of me pushing the wrong thing and fucking up a show. And that came after a couple of, I guess, bad experiences where I'd come in unprepared and just had, I'd used either like a layout that was already done by the house people, or I'd done everything quickly and not really looked after cloning things in or anything like that. So I sat down for 2 weeks and went, okay, how can I make this so that everything is always exactly where I want it? And one button is one push, and things just kind of happen, and I'm not constantly changing pages, trying to find out where I am. And I realized that if I make the layout the same every time, I know this is probably common sense to most of you, but when I was starting out with MA, I didn't realize quite how important it is that all your buttons are always exactly where you want them to be, because that can be the difference between you absolutely nailing the timing on something or being nearly right and hitting it slightly afterwards, which when you're watching back your own show can be a night and day difference. You're like, oh, I nearly hit that, instead of, yeah, I nailed that. So that's kind of how I ended up with the punt file that I did. And I started doing timecode after, quite a long time after the fact. So I did timecode intros, and then for a few people I was working with, they wanted like everything timecoded. So okay, cool, let's start doing that. And I realized that quite a clever way of actually getting from A to B is to use a lot of the same presets and effects as I'm using in my punt file in my timecode file. So the idea being that when I'm on site, if I get my punt file to work, in theory, all my timecode stuff should work. In reality, I've kind of gone a bit deeper than that now, and the resulting file is it's the result of a few years of bolting things on and finding new, better ways of doing things. But similarly, like, there's a lot of redundant stuff in here still that I need to go and clear out. And I'll go through a few examples of that in a little bit. Yeah, the basic concept going back is that one button does one thing, less changing of pages, and giving yourself the least possible opportunity to mess up, whilst giving you as much control as possible at your fingertips. To illustrate kind of what that entails, if I go to this view where I kind of have just, so up in the top right here is my capture view, which is just a basic stage which I've laid out, which has 20 of each fixture. I just stick to my light size. So yeah, some beams, some spots. I think they're mega pointies, vipers, some aura XBs, some I think those are X4s, and then two sets of LED sticks, because for some reason on festival stages you always get two different types of LED, some strobes, some blinders, some sun strips, and that kind of covers most use cases. So when I'm programming for timecode, I'll use pretty much this file to get my songs done before we start sort of looking at I designed it like this so that you can kind of go to most stages without much effort in the cloning process. So fairly standard. Let's go to my light layout. Sort of positions. I keep it really simple on the positions. I just do a couple. So mid and up, sky, some other stuff. And I use all of those and a couple of extra ones to kind of design most of the looks in the show. And then, yeah, the idea behind the punt layout, which kind of feeds into timecode and the cloning stuff, is that on my left hand, I will be sort of like dimmers for things and quick access to things like instant chases and bumpy things. And on my right hand, I'm going to have access to a bunch of macros, which you can see on my X keys down here, which can mean that I can kind of very quickly just get between, I don't know, some pretty, I don't know, fast and crazy stuff, and then just come out of it quickly into, I don't know, something that's kind of more sine wavy and a nice breakdown. Because a lot of the time with EDM, you can kind of predict what's going to happen, but it'll still like catch you out. There'll be fake drops and things like that. So being able to change things really quickly was important for me. So being able to just sort of like fly around and be doing some cool shit and then suddenly just stop everything and bring it back into normality, I guess. And then that's kind of the basis behind the layout anyway. So that there's a bunch of things on the right hand which change what's happening with the queue stacks on my left hand, because all these are doing is jumping around queues. And that's kind of the basis of the punt file. Everything else, you have buttons that do cool things, because if you make a bunch of buttons that do cool things, it doesn't really matter if you hit the wrong one. And little other things in here from macros, like things that you can hit for melodies. Like if you have a sort of pluck melody and anything, and you hit, I don't know, just you want to hit something every time it happens, suddenly your punt show looks a bit like a timecode show, because it looks like everything kind of happens at the right time. So there's a bunch of stuff like that in here, which is just kind of engineered to get the most show out of, I don't want to say it from a lazy point of view, because it's the most show out of the least effort, but
out of the least number of button pushes.
The least number of button pushes, so that I've got less chance of getting it wrong. And that does kind of feed into the way that it's laid out and programmed. So I keep it really simple on groups. Let me show you my MA screen big. So in my base file and in whatever we end up with, I'll just have like a set of beams, some spots, some washes, some LED stuff, some strobes, some blinders, and that's pretty much all I usually do. LED stuff I'll keep to instances. Masters will go here because that'll have all the pan tilt values, or well, just tilt, I guess, these days. And then if I am faced with a situation where I don't have any of these groups, the show will probably run just fine without it. There might be a couple of bits where I've done some kind of 4-step chases that, if you don't have a wash 2 in there, might look a bit weird. But for the most part, what I'll do is say it's like, so EDC Mexico is a file that I might pull up in a minute, which was something like 200 Sharpies and no washes. So I basically would just divide that so that like my beam group is still the beams that are doing the job of the beam. My spots would be the actual spots, and then wash 1 and wash 2 would be 2 other groups of Sharpies. And it doesn't really matter that they're labeled wrong. They're going to behave much the same. They'll just be on, like, they'll take the cloning data in the timecode tracks and do a pretty good job of figuring out what's supposed to happen. The only thing I do have to do there is like the way that I do my aerial effects, my gobos and prisms and stuff. I would just then manually clone them from my beam so that they do much the same thing. Coming back onto the subject of making the show file as simple as possible. With large scale EDM shows, at least the way that I like doing them, I have some fairly controversial views on the subject of what's kind of important to the show and what isn't. So I don't really like to use a bunch of gobos, and I think it's comes from a place of like you need to kind of think about what you need accessible to you at all times in your show. And what you probably don't need is every possible gobo combination that the light can do. What you probably need is maybe 2 or 3 looks. So on here, I have basically a fat beams, a tiny beams, and a pretty thing. And that's most of my show, is because nobody's really going to be stood there in the crowd going, he's only used 1 breakup gobo, and looking at your show. So there are times and places where you are going to need, like, obviously more detailed stuff. But I like to just keep it so that I have 3 buttons that change, like, what happens in my show. And maybe I'll do a pretty 2, pretty 3, whatever. That's sort of, I do these all presets, which are, that way it's just, I have everything that it could possibly be programmed in there. And these are probably going to look like trash. But yeah, that way, if I want to use a gobo one day, it's fine. If I want to use a prism the next day on the next show, it's fine. So there's a certain amount of stuff that you're going to have to figure out when you get on site. And I try and keep that as small as possible. Just some all presets for my aerial stuff. And then I have some macro stuff, which will figure out, basically, I do 1 left and 1 right, and then it'll make a nice symmetrical rotation effect, which you can speed up and down. Yeah, it's about sort of condensing what you actually need in your show to, I mean, I don't need to do more than 14 colors. I probably don't need to do more than 4 colors for most of the shows that I do, but I program them all anyway. Positions, I probably don't need more than 9. And well, I actually do need more than 9, but I'll go into that in a minute. That's how a lot of the sort of more movement effects are. The pan tilt dim effects that I use quite heavily are based on a few more position presets. But yeah, the more you can kind of slim down what you're attempting to achieve on site, the more you're going to get out of the time that you do get on site. And I know probably don't need to tell anybody who's done a festival before or a or even nightclubs or whatever. Your time on site can be anything from an hour to 2 hours to you have 5 minutes and then we have to leave, to the festival is already open and you have to program whilst people are coming in, or it could be we just don't have time to program today. Yeah. So that's a kind of, this is where like your relationship with the house guy is going to kind of come into it fairly well, because you're going to want to take all of their positions, everything you can, and just try and make something work that doesn't look crap.
Some days you only get changeover.
Yeah, some days you only get changeover. Sometimes you miss your programming and you have a couple of band changeovers where they'll let you on to do stuff. Like one of my first festivals, Lollapalooza, 2015, I had some flight trouble, didn't get in time, missed my programming, and had to do everything in band changeovers and kind of wait for it to get dark enough for me to see what I'm doing, and then work on all my stuff like 5 minutes at a time. And then there was a storm, which where basically rained off the thing, and only 20 minutes of our 90-minute show happened. So in some ways it matters, in some ways the show is going to happen either way. It's the amount of time is sort of like, and how well you spend it is just going to dictate how well it goes. So yeah, I kind of lost track a bit. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, so thinking about the number of gobos and aerial effects you need, thinking about the number of shutter effects you need. I mean, I keep it very simple as an open, a random, and a fast, and that's pretty much it. And then a bunch of Speedmasters. Like, how many do you actually need? I see people with like a separate one for, or like with weird values and things like that. In EDM, you're probably working at a fairly standard 4/4 BPM. So why not have all of your chases and all of your effects actually work at that BPM? So I have one chase master, which at the moment is set at 128 BPM, and a movement master. And I don't need a lot more than that. I think I have one more for flyout. So if I push my flyout key and some stuff flying out, that's on its own speed master because that has to be different. But for all the stuff that needs to be BPM synced, I only need one BPM, and then I can modify that with the rate setting in the effects if I need to. Because really, I want everything to be locked and to be as punchy as it can be and on time. What else can you economize? Instances. So this is something where I think a lot of people and me disagree. Is like, if you have a bunch of BIs or a bunch of JDCs and you have them in silly mode with all of the possible instances available, what I'll generally do is either I do this quite a lot. I'll have just like a random queue down here with a bunch of stuff in it. Things like I will set all of my zooms to as narrow as they can go for a bunch of my washes and like LED bars and things like that, because I know that for this specific show, I want them to be tight and punchy because I'm probably fighting an LED wall, or because I might be fighting daylight and I want it to be as visible as possible. Sometimes I'll stick an instance master in there so that I'll either do all of, depending on the type of fixture I'm working with, I'll either put all the master intensities up at full and stick that in a queue and forget about it, or I'll stick all the instances up at full and forget about it and do all the effects on the master. So it's about, I guess, knowing your fixtures and figuring out what's going to be the best course of action to get you a show in the least amount of time. If you have time and you want to do something with making the instance stuff really special and do like loads of twinkly stuff, great. But for the most part, we don't have time. It's I'd rather spend my time making sure that my positions look on point and that most of the show looks as good as possible than worrying why my twinkle effect is asymmetrical across my 20 JDCs or whatever it is. And the other thing is, if you program with instances in mind and sort of dependent on them, when you don't have them, your show is going to look really weird because everything that's supposed to be small and twinkly is big and silly. But yeah, there's, like I say, the way that I do this works for me. It's probably not going to be right for everybody. Covered that already. Choosing sensible groups. I mean, for me, making 4 groups of moving lights has worked for me because I'm working in EDM, and a bunch of my effects will have kind of different. I'll make this one big. So I'll have a bunch of stuff that will, I guess, for each. What's a good one? So if I show you this ramp down one, that one will have, I don't know, different phasing. Yeah, so that has a phase of 0, and then for my next group, it's going to have a phase of 180. So that I have my spots and my beams sort of pinging off each other, like so. And my washes will do much the same thing, and it'll stay sing like that. So that's kind of why I adopted the 4-group thing, and it's mainly kind of what you kind of see on a lot of festivals is that you'll get 4 groups of lights. Like I say, if you don't, then that's when you start dividing things up. Coming back to why this file is the way it is. So I had it so that it builds from macros, and this is kind of before I figured out all the cloning stuff. So if I show you my build show macro, edit him. Then it pretty much just calls a bunch of other macros. I've added the confirmation here just so that I don't run it twice, because that sucks if you run it, change a bunch of stuff, and then it starts building your show again. But yeah, this is kind of a more manual process of each of these will do a different thing. So first thing it does is copy a bunch of template effects, which are sort of the first effects in my file, to all of my lighting groups. Then I have this thing that makes them selective, which I think, yeah, so there's some macro stuff here which will go through, select all of my groups and make them selective, which is a good way of making them sort of just behave the way you want them to quickly. This updates some stuff in some stacks. Aerial effects, this builds them out of those presets that I showed you earlier and puts them in a queue stack, and then have the buttons that jump around that queue stack. That's how it all changes. Rotations, kind of related, that will just kind of use some MA tricks to split them in half. Then send half of them one way, half the other way, and save them as a new rotation preset, which becomes like what we fade to with your temp fader. Colors. I do colors a kind of weird way, and I know, having watched Jason's video the other day, that I could definitely do it a quicker way and a more efficient way by cloning fixture types. But what this does is goes through and makes sure that everything in my color picker makes sense and is using the correct preset. So if I've maybe cloned from something that only has RGB, but now it has RGBW, it's going to go through and put that in the queue stacks. What it also does is makes a bunch of base presets somewhere. So that becomes quite important with the color picker. So it means that when I, for example, wait, where did I put it? I put it, so that would be in my beam one, so that would be 5.beam color. Let's look at that. Here we go. So there's a bunch of macro lines here, which will take colors from wherever I put them and merge them into a base preset. So when I push beams red, my base preset here, which is right here, will have red info in it for my beams. So that means that when I'm doing a bunch of effects or bumps or whatever, it will use that as the base. So that if I now change that to whatever, it will still be the base preset. So yeah, that's kind of why that is the way it is. It means that you can kind of build effects that make a bit more sense and have bitmap effects that make sense as well, because you can use that preset. Some funky color stuff there. But yeah, you can use that preset as a low and then have a high to bump to, which you can then change in a number of different ways. So yeah, that's kind of why that is the way it is. Let me go back to my programming page. So we would just got to the color bit. The rest of it is yeah, effects, bump, and chaser. So that's kind of, I realized that instead of having a bunch of chase effects, I could replace it all with one effect, which is kind of cool if you're, I don't know, if you got some stuff, and then you can just hit one chaser effect and then modify it. So I want it to go in 3s instead of 2s. I can put shift, go double speed. I can just change its rate, and off it goes. And then I can change kind of the whether it's going to fade, whether it's going to snap, and kind of taking, instead of what would have taken up maybe 4 or 5 buttons, I can make it one button that I can change its behavior of, which kind of worked well for me in the live sense. Where it sort of comes through to cloning into timecode is that I'll actually call a lot of these same macros in the queue stacks so that I'm leaving myself a decent place to exit from, so that what's happening with my queue stacks that kind of drive all of this is going to be resilient. So if I'm running a timecode track and I come out of it, I'm not going to go to everything white pointing at the sky. I'm going to come out to whatever that track was kind of doing. So I'll have the correct colors selected. I'll have a useful position selected. Because even if you've kind of got a really solid plan for how your show is going to go, and you might have a set list with everything in it. Everything might go differently. Because you never know if the guy who's playing before you might close out his set with one of the biggest songs of that your artist is going to play. So that might just change everything, or maybe just the vibe is wrong and he has to change it up and do something else. So you need to be able to get in and out of your time code relatively quickly and effectively. So I have it so that a lot of this stuff is called or at least referenced by name. Let me show you an example. So if I look at any of these timecode songs, yeah, you see there's a bunch of macros here, which will do aura TC, bump wipe strobe, chase twos, tweak ups, which is to do with my position chase stuff. So if I just give you an example of what that looks like, that's this stuff. So that would be up tweaks, down tweaks, just changing through things. I always find it's more interesting to combine movement with dimming at the same time. I can't remember where I saw it first, but like it's a really neat trick. It's like there's a lot of stuff in EDM is just swirl and flash, and this kind of makes it a lot more. It makes everything look intentional and direct. So I like to do that a lot. But yeah, that's kind of what those macros hidden there in the Q stack do. All right, where am I up to? Finishing nicely. So go a bit now into sort of the way the timecode stuff works, or at least the way I have it set. So I have all of my, well, most of my timecode stuff is actually just here. That's mainly for programming purposes. So I don't really need to see it when I'm running. So if I select, wait, turn shortcuts on. There we go. So this is mainly when I'm just figuring it all out. But yeah, I have a way that I launch these because I use show control to link up with CDJs. So on this page here, which is kind of my left screen, I'll have something where I can choose which song we're going to do. But it doesn't happen straight away. All that does is sets a variable, which is what's my next timecode going to be. And that's just the timecode ID. And that's the exec that it lives on. And this is something I added just because there's been a few shows where I had to run video as well as lighting, mainly on just smaller shows. Like for the most part, we have a great video team, but yeah, there's like some video stuff in there as well, just to kind of tie it all together in case I have to do everything myself. And then I have these CDJ macros down here, which I'll be looking at show control, or actually more recently, I don't need to because show control will telnet into the console and it will rename these 4 holding macros down here. So I have deck 1, deck 2, deck 3, deck 4. That one seems to say something rude, but never mind. And it will turn them green when they start playing. So I'll see the track name come up here. I'll be like, okay, cool. Next we're doing this. And then as soon as I hit a good point where I want to do a hard switch, I'll push CDJ3 and stuff will start happening. So I kind of choose a hard point and commit to it. And then I get some kind of feedback. This goes green, and I know that it's going to be taking that from the right place and doing the right thing. What it'll also do is queue up an exit macro. I don't think I've actually put anything in there yet. It's going to take me a while to find because this file's a mess. But the idea being that when I push the off button, something will happen. Whether that is set to exactly this, but I could have it so that, oh, I know that when I come out of this, it's going to be something I'm going to do live, and I want everything in white pointing at the sky or whatever. So I can put all of that in a macro and just have that triggered when we decide it's time to stop timecode.
And just for clarification, just for my own purpose, you are like regularly exiting songs at different points, right? Is that the situation you're dealing with?
Yeah, that's kind of what it's designed to negate. Is because sometimes you will, like, there's no guarantee that the set's going to go like with any artist, like they might do something completely different one night to the next night. And with the best planning in the world, you're going to get it kind of close, unless your artist is boring and plays the same thing all the time. But most of them aren't. So yeah, that's kind of the process behind having all this timecode stuff integrated like that and calling the macros the same way. So if the reason that these are sort of big in caps and labeled like that, like these macros down here on my X keys, is so that I can say, all right, for this one, I know I'm going to want a kind of tiny beams look. So I'll put that in the queue. Other things that I'll put in the queue, I haven't actually done it in any of these, but a nice little trick, because when I was, one of the first projects I did in full time code was the Alice in Wonderland tour last year, I think. Was it last year? Yeah, I think so. I did a bunch of programming for it, and then my friend Kevin went out and ran it and was a tour LD for quite a long time. And yeah, they're changing BPMs in that. So what I would do is because there's no guarantee that they're going to happen at the same time or at the same speed every night, I would just find 4 beats in a row in the time code that I knew would get played. So they would be maybe in the first breakdown or whatever. I just put 4 cues on 4 beats, and then I'd stick macro lines on those 4 cues when they're brought into the MA that says, I mean, I just define some variables like hashtag, it's not in hashtag, so I just do learn BPM, and then that would basically tap. So here where I have this tap BPM 1, yeah, learn special master 3.1. So I would just basically call that 4 times, and then my chases are synced to not just the song, but the song at the speed that it's being played. That makes sense? Yeah, cool. So that was a cute little trick of putting things in the queues that make kind of sense with my file. I couldn't tell you what these ones do though. It's no idea. Yeah, when it comes down to the actual programming though, I have taken a couple of different approaches, and I think what I've learned over the years is that there's no one best way of programming all of your songs, because like some of these will have, I don't know, 20 cues, some of them will have 10, some of them not so much in this, but when I was doing a bit more on like the pop music side, or the even bass music as well, very intricate stuff, some of those are Reaper projects with 160 cues in them before the first drop, and it's not a particularly efficient way of working. And I remember watching a couple of other guys who were doing what I was doing with 100 cues with 10 cues and 4 temp buttons. So I've kind of started adopting a bit of that approach, and I have a bunch of pages spread out which just have kind of, I don't know, cool things in them, which you can like, so I'll do some stuff that's in cues, and then things like black out my rig from one side to the other, or like temp buttons that I can push over the top, which will do something cool. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is that I'm balancing like the effects that are in here and what can easily be cloned and doesn't require too much attention on site or for each show. And balancing it, trying to get it down to like, I don't know, places where I've used 30 cues. Can I get away with 10 and 3 buttons? And what a few people who do timecode do is, like, say you've used a bunch of buttons like this on your X keys, they'll make a page which just has all of those buttons on them. So they know that if they've gone and done their check every single button, that their show is going to work. They don't necessarily have to go to each page and find where they've stored, like, I don't know, where I've put like ups to the right or anything like that. Yeah, just like where I've done things that would be quite difficult to program with cues, they can be fairly simple to program with either temp buttons or some other kind of, these are just cue lists with timing. Sometimes that's going to work way better than having a big long cue list.
And I mean, that's a fantastic way to be like, that's a way to work that like I've been trying to do more of, is to be able to work with executors rather than queues, because like you're saying, like you can check, you can do so much more on that, and so much more is just being handled just by priorities of items. But just figuring out how to get into that where you have a clean update process is kind of the big learning curve on that. So just that and the stuff you've been just noodling through so far looks pretty sick.
Thanks, man. It's like I think that is the trickiest thing about all this, is that you're not going to get it right the first time, or the second time, or the third time. And I don't think I still got it right. I think every iteration of this, I'm getting more of it, but there's still more time I can save. There's a few other nice little features in here, which I guess I should show you on a different file. But when it comes to actually your stuff, I made this little kind of quick and dirty programming selection of macros, which if I have my 3D up, don't I? So if I take my beams, and one thing you're probably going to want to do quite a lot is, I don't know, fan them out. So I have, instead of making that 2 key presses, I make it 1 key press so that it can kind of come together like that. I have a pan split, which will kind of divide them in the middle. And that's just automating a matrix and groups, so that, again, giving yourself as little to think about as possible in the time that you've got, because you probably haven't slept for quite a long time. You're probably like trying to just like, I don't know,
Survive.
maybe you've got your hour and you just want to get everything in the bag so that you can kind of get out of there before the sun comes up. I don't know, stuff like that. So yeah, there's a few little things in here, little handy tilt inverts, encoder inverts, little things that will get you out of trouble quickly. Very quick odd evens. Like I have something that will just go, okay, I want 1 and 2 symmetrical, I want 1 and 3 symmetrical, and then I can just tab through these. Or I want all my odd ones. That doesn't work. Matrix reset. There we go. Odd ones, even ones. Just little time savers. What else? This one's quite cool. So I work in layouts a lot, and with the groups that I have. So I'll just store over these. So I just cleared out these layouts. I have a little plugin which myself and Jason Buckley wrote, which will just basically go through all of my groups and create layouts for me. But what it does as well is it'll put a bitmap box around them and assign it to my bitmapper, so that I don't have to think about anything. I can just start playing back my bitmap effects and they'll all work. That saves a bit of time. It also means that when you're trying to get your symmetrical selections in order, because so if I just save one here, and then I have this little sim checker macro, which just runs a I just inverted my tilt by mistake. There we go. So at the moment I run my sim checker, it's not symmetrical, but I can see in here that all I have to do is kind of select like that, then like that. And if I run it again, it's still not symmetrical. It's because I'm trying to show it. There you go. So little things like that just speed up your process. You can instantly look and see if it's right or not before you commit it. And it's important to do that before you start taking selections to effects and things like that. So make sure that you have symmetrical groups. If symmetry is what you want, it's what not everybody wants it. They're wrong, but not everybody wants it. That kind of leads me into a bit of the cloning process. So once I have everything lined up, actually, I'll just show you in a new file. I'll show you the. So what I did before we went live is I took a copy of UC Mexico. Let's see. And I just did the BSR because nobody wants to sit here and watch a progress bar go from left to right any more than this. But does kind of lead me into an important bit. When you're doing a PSR, I would say only take the things that you need from the house file. And again, this comes back to your relationship with the house guy or house person, I guess. When you're in contact with them, I will ask for whatever they are willing to give me. Positions, because they've had a lot more time with the rig than you. And for the most part, they're very happy to share. Like, I know certainly the few times when I've been a house guy, I try and give the guest LD everything that they might need to do their show. So I'll give them symmetrical groups. I'll give them presets that if I've had to update them that day, I'll give them the stick and say, here is the latest presets. You can merge them into your show. I mean, some people do their own anyway, but yeah, the more that you can take from them, the better. So I have a couple of, where are we? So I have a couple of import pages here, which I should really move from screen 4, because if you ever get a light, then screen 4 is kind of gone. But I'll import all the stuff from the festival or whatever into a specific place so that I know where I can get it. So I can be, okay, let's have a look at these positions. All right, that one works with my mid or my up or whatever. Let me pull this full screen actually, since we're not going to have viz for this. Unfortunately, I can't previz this stage because I was telling Jason earlier, when I did previz this before, I had a WYSIWYG license, which doesn't care about parameters. Now I have a capture license, which does care about parameters, and I don't have that many parameters.
We're all waiting on that new previz protocol.
Yeah, that'd be nice. So yeah, when I'm coming into, let's see, so that's still got my old stuff there. So what I'll kind of do first is so here's all my Sharpies. Let's put those there as beams. Let's say my 3015s as spots. Let's say, actually, these ones on the deck will be my wash 1s. I'll leave wash 2 blank for now. These epics will be my LEDs. These nitro colors can be my LED 2. And these nitro whites will be my strobe. So if I now push badass layouts, I'm suddenly going to have, all right, so there's all my beam fixtures, the whole stage, spots, washes, wash 2. That's going to be coming from the old stuff. There's all my LED. There's my second LEDs. And then I might decide that actually I want all this stuff to be wash 2. So I'll just save that as wash 2. And then I'll take that, I'll minus that, and store that over right. And I'll run this again. Okay, now I've got something to play with. So fairly simple to make that symmetrical. Very difficult to see if it's worked, but probably has. Make that symmetrical. This one should be fairly simple too. I do have a plugin that does this. It doesn't do it very well. If the 3D is even slightly inaccurate, it will decide that symmetry is not something for you today. So that's something that needs a bit of work. So generally, I just do it manually because it's fairly quick, usually. LED, that one's going to be kind of wrong, but there we go. That one, let's have a look. Yeah, so.
And I assume you're being very intentional about that down up first, top down second half, making sure you're getting, for the purpose of that symmetry.
Yes. Yeah. So at this point, I'll usually start by doing a left right, and then if that doesn't look right, I'll do one like that. Whether I've done any of that correctly, because obviously I'm just doing it for illustrative purposes here. You can just trust me. Yeah, it's definitely right. So at this point, I've got my groups filled, and for argument's sake, they're symmetrical. Is my cloning page, and I try and keep this, again, very clear, so there's my source fixtures here, and then where they're going. So my beam clones, and then
hold on a second. Your audio's clipping through pretty bad.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Something just went wrong with the stream quality here.
Oh dear.
Uh-oh. Stand by. Let's see what's going on here.
Well, good. How are we doing? Am I waffling a bit?
You just came back. Your full resolution audio sounds good again.
Awesome. Cool. I blame my internet service provider. They're a bit flaky. I was up to the cloning macros, wasn't I? So each of these macros, I have it separated out so I can just run them one at a time if I need to. So if I've messed something up, I can go back and start again. And then I'll have this one clone all, which basically will just run them all. I use naming and wildcards a lot because I don't like using macro numbers just in case I move something around or I move a bunch of things around. Does mean you have to remember to name things only once. Keep unique names, otherwise it'll default to either the first or the last instance that it finds in your macro pool, which is not very helpful. So yeah, if I go ahead and clone all of that, it's just going to go through and low priority merge all of my stuff and take all of my selection. So yeah, that's basically all that's doing is taking clone data from, as Jason explained last week, from the source fixtures to the destination fixtures. What it's then going to do, what I'm going to do to it next is tidy some of the effect selections up. So that big long stack of macros, which takes 3 minutes to run to build my show at the beginning, this is it's like an example of a time that I've learned a better way since and haven't gone back and applied that to the rest of my file. And the more I think about it, I could have definitely done it in the time that I've spent thinking about whether I should do it or not. So I should really go back and do that. But this fixed song effects macro here, I'll sort of go into a bit of detail about what it does first. So these are just like the general effects which run my Punt show. And further down here, I have a bunch of stuff which is specific. It started off being specific to songs, and now it's specific to types of fixtures. So I'll have some beam underscore stuff, and then some spot underscore stuff. And then I thought, I'm out of space. So I just made it go big forever. But it's all named with the type of fixture and then an underscore and then whatever, which means that when I come back to clone all my stuff, if you look at this macro, it literally just goes group 3, store there. Group 4, store there. Group 5, store here. And this runs in under a second, and well, maybe not under a second, but it runs pretty close to a second. And now all of my timecode effects have had that selection taken, and they will look pretty close to correct when we run the show. And that's taken a huge time away from like what I might have spent either programming or swearing at why it wasn't working the way it was supposed to, just because I've laid out the effects a certain way, labeled them a certain way, and then had a macro that affects them all a certain way.
So when it comes to symmetry for you, is pretty much the only symmetry you're really worried about going with effects? No, I guess not to say that your positions wouldn't, but in contrast to the way I was setting up my cloning process, where I'm making sure like center of my source fixtures is center for my destinations, it seems like for yours, all that really matters is that the group that you're putting in there is symmetrical itself, because symmetry will be handled by wings from that point, is the assumption.
Yeah, pretty much. Another assumption that I make is that I'm going to have to do my positions when I get there anyway. I'm not going to try and guess and get it right. I have done that before when I've had WYSIWYG and I've been able to do like stacks and stacks of parameters and get it kind of close close enough so that when I do get there, I'm either playing with offsets to get everything in, but I find like even when you're dealing with this many fixtures as well, like you might get the offset close, but you're still going to have to fine tune your position. You're going to have to go through each one and look and make a couple of little adjustments anyway. So yeah, that's like I for symmetry. Yeah, I mean I am applying things to it, but I'm doing all the positions when I get there usually.
Right, but since
So I'm not.
yeah, I guess just since you are actively storing back into all of those effects rather than it just being a cloned effect, it doesn't matter where center lines up from source fixtures. It just means as long as your original group is symmetrical, your effects are going to look symmetrical.
Yeah, for sure.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, they'll all kind of take the new selection order and just yeah, they'll just do their thing.
Very nice.
Where I also do use some symmetry sometimes, say if I'll just like take all of these groups and store them here in a new layout, and then just arrange that by 3D, front, 2D. So when I'm actually coming up with a couple of my presets, maybe if I'm this one, so like things like those tweak presets that I was doing before, I'll say that, okay, that's my entire left side of the rig. I'll just store that as in my, oops, wrong one. So yeah, if I then store that as left, and then I'll say that all of this stuff is the top. And then I can take everything, store it there, and then if I just subtract top, I get bottom. And if I take tweak group, subtract left, I get right. So I now have a bunch of groups which I can use to make presets. So if I actually have one here which will, there's a macro which will go through and decide, basically take the left rig and use my existing pan tilt presets to make some stuff that kind of flies out to the left or the right, or so it kind of generates where my windows all gone to crap. There we go. So yeah, these I can't even show you on the viz, but yeah, so the source presets for the position pan tilt stuff I was showing you. Let me see. So another thing that I use quite a lot in the show is the is delay sweeps and effects. I do it a kind of backwards way because I have it in the I've swapped my windows around. That's why it's confusing. Let's put you down here. You up here. So yeah, I have basically the normal delay sweeps here, which will affect my color picker. One here that just affects one button that I push, so that I can swap to any color. But in the timecode, it's generally I do it a more simple way, which is I just have a couple of presets here, which will be quarter second out from center, into center, and it's just kind of macro based. And then as part of my update process, there's something here which I've just ran instead of editing. But yeah, this will go through some other macros, which will just basically everywhere I've done a delay preset effect, I have a target sequence and then a macro which will apply that that delay preset to it and merge it in. It just means that I don't really have to worry about updating that stuff once I'm on site and once it's all kind of working. One note, I know I keep coming back to this, but when you are PSRing things, if you're taking layouts, never take one that's got macros in it because it's going to overwrite all the stuff in your file wherever that macro is. So if somebody there and their macros start at 100 and you've got a load of stuff in at 100, your stuff is going to get overwritten, which I learned the hard way.
That's an important note. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know if they fixed it in recent versions because like about a year ago I stopped taking taking layouts in the PSR completely.
So conversely, as the house guy, don't put macros in there for the guest LDs.
Yeah, I mean they get a whenever I'm the house guy, what you'll get from me is I know that as a touring guy, you don't want any of my stuff that's there to make my life easier. What you want is an empty show file with some useful groups and positions in it and stuff that is gonna kind of look right. Um, I'll just go back to demo show here. And yeah, I'm kind of coming to the end of what I'd envisage going through here, but I'm happy to cover anything that you think I've missed or anything from the chat. Um, just happy to kind of be back involved and working on this stuff. It's been a while since I've had to look at a real show, so yeah.
Oh. Oh, go ahead.
Is there anything you think needs covering?
Not as much
beyond this
covering. I just did want to point out that as you were building those groups, those top, bottom, left, and right, just for anybody watching who might not have picked up on it, how important it is that he did that with subtracting, which or could be doing with invert or whatever, but so that you are not missing any fixtures out of the full group. You know that you are basically taking everything in this except for what I already have in its opposite, so that instead of trying to lasso left and lasso right, you don't have to worry that you missed something in between or grabbed anything twice. So I just thought that was good to point out there.
Yeah, and it's a trick that I figured out way too late. I'd done it the long way a lot, and a lot of stuff with selection order is just experimentation, what looks right, and being able to kind of go back and kind of figure out whether you have your selection order right, and if so, can you update it quickly? I see there's a question in the chat. Can you show us the group to layout with bitmap macros?
Plugin, isn't it?
That's a plugin, and let me see. I mean, there's nothing particularly secret in it, but I did write it with my friend, so I don't know if I can necessarily.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, it's all it does is basically it gets the position data from each fixture, creates an XML file for the layout, and then kind of figures out, okay, so this is my top left, and I'm going to have to start my rectangle somewhere to the left, and I'm going to end it somewhere down here to the right, and have a little bit of space. And if you look at the XML for a layout, you can pretty much figure out how to do that. Okay, so another question, if I've got, let's say, 20 beams in my file, I've got to clone that to, let's say, 32 beams in a rig, doing that from a symmetrical group to a symmetrical group will sort out those sweeps and so on. Okay, so that will work for effects, but it won't work for delay sweeps. Delay sweeps don't update in real time. So if you're using Jason's plugin or any iteration of it, he ships it with an updater. And because I couldn't be bothered to rewrite it at all, I just run it twice for my 2 instances of it, one straight after the other. I have this quick and dirty quick rows, which I can't remember exactly what it does. Oh yeah, so I built this thing. Apologies if I'm rambling because it's been a while since I've looked at all this stuff. So I realized that making rows for sweeps was fairly important. So I have it so that all of these rows get kind of created from whatever groups I have. Just in case I don't have time to go and say what's a row, because ideally I would just say, okay, I'm working on, so where are my groups program? All right, so if I'm saying that I want to work on my beams, then that's a row, and then that's a row, and it will just populate this list up here. And also then I'll just manually sort of make all of these ones. That's if I was going to do this really properly. I kind of made that quicker and just made one button, which will assume that I've got symmetrical groups and that I don't care about up and because for the most part, festival stages are big and wide and not very tall. So this will go kind of automate that process and remove data entry for me because I don't want to be stood there front of house trying to remember numbers that I've either written down or forgotten about. I kind of want it to just work. So I push this, and it's going to get me fairly close, if not exactly what I want. So that's going to do all of my sweep stuff, and then run the macro that I showed you earlier with the applying those sweep presets to different points of my timecode show, if that makes sense. Sorry, probably a bit of a rambling explanation, but I think I touched on the points.
Got a question for social media links for you.
I'll put one in the chat. Yeah, I'll send some through.
Cool. And we'll make those available on that event page as well. Sorry, I should have collected one of those earlier. Is your on PC locked up there?
Is it locked up?
Yeah, I'm still seeing that. Oh, yep, there it is.
It's a good job that happened at the end. Maybe it's because I'm in session.
Maybe it's because of my shitty ass plugin.
I don't know. It's probably doing it because I'm trying to show off that I cut some corners. There we go. That's a good crash.
Yeah.
Let's cut to 3D. That looks pretty.
There we go. I did want to ask, I don't know if you got to get on PC rebooted there, but something's working. The process of getting these macros built, what's your process for that? Like, as I'm sure it's kind of evolved as you've gone, but is this more of a like as you add new things into the file, you add lines to the macro, or do you just kind of have some sessions where you go through everything that's in your file and figure out what macros do they need to be added into to get updated?
For the most part, I get bored and I try things. So I kind of sit back every now and then. When I was flying on a lot of planes to a lot of shows, I did most of this programming actually on this little Surface Book 2, which I just traveled with everywhere. And it's kind of cool because for a taller and larger gentleman like myself on a plane, you can't usually like get a laptop out to work. And yeah, a lot of it was just me thinking, okay, here's something that I do manually all the time. Can I make that a macro? Can I make it, or can I do it with Lua? I mean, I haven't really delved too much into Lua. I think I remember telling you ages ago that I initially had this great grand plan that I wanted to be able to sort of have a script that built my entire show file, and I could just walk up to someone else's console with their show file on it and run a bunch of stuff and then have my layout. And that is possible, but I couldn't necessarily get it to anticipate what I would want to do with various different situations. So I was kind of down that route for a while of like figuring out what could and couldn't be done with Lua. And eventually I just thought macros are kind of simple, and I like them. And I don't mind writing long and complicated ones if it solves a problem and makes it easy. Because the only reason any of them exist in here is to make my life easier. It's not like they're not necessarily doing anything that you can't do the long way. It's just I'd like to be able to do it in minutes instead of hours, or seconds instead of minutes, because time is the most valuable thing that you are going to have, like in this line of work. It's you got to make the most of every single second that you get to work on the show that you're going to get. And I think a lot of that comes from making the right decisions early. And some of it does come from inventive, like macro programming, but I don't know. It's like most of the ideas have just come from, here is something that I'm doing a lot. I'm spending a lot of time doing. Can I either cut it down so it's basically just the bare bones of what it needs to be for the show to look good, or can I automate it using either macros or Lua? So that's kind of how we've ended up where we are.
So there's no like rigid process to that. It's just a matter of as you're going
it's
along.
Experimentation and finding what it's like. If I had to start this file again, I'd do it a completely different way.
Sure.
Having found like the way to do the selective effects, I'd probably do that from the beginning. I'd probably now look at cloning fixture types and seeing if there's a way that I can do that with no data entry, which there probably is. But or if not no data entry, just putting things in the right place and letting the macros or the Lua make sense of it.
Right.
And I think a lot of it comes back to just organization as well. Because like I know for a guy with a I don't know 2,000 macros in his file to talk about organization is probably a bit rich, but when it comes to actually organizing your fixtures, your positions, your whatever you can do to make your process quicker, like simple things like programming page, I work from top to bottom. Those are all my groups, and then I do colors first, then I do positions, then I'll do beams, then I'll do focus. I might do focus first, maybe if I need a tight beam to focus the damn thing. But the concept is that I'm sort of working methodically through it until I know I have enough to do a show that might.
Right. Responding to Cedric here again, I think he's just asking about basically I think I hit on, I don't know if he was in yet, the fact that you are storing back into your effects actively, so you don't have to worry about your cloning symmetry as long as your groups are symmetrical, unless you read that comment differently.
Let me see. So what's the this is the one. What's the best way for you reacting to music live? Okay, so I'll answer that in a couple of parts because you've got go back to this view. So reacting to music live, that's kind of why I have everything on these macro buttons on my right hand, so that I can very quickly go from like some basically just change the whole, I guess, emotion of the rig quickly. So that it's like we're either going like super ragey or whatever, and then just, oh, we might want that, and we'll come out of it. And then having little things that will sort of aid your transitions is kind of what's going to set you apart, and nailings that when you go live, you're not thinking, okay, I want everything to spin and I want it all to go white and strobe. Can you make that either a single button or buttons that are very close together so that you can kind of go, okay, cool, we're flying, cool, sweet, we're off? Because you don't know for sure what's going to happen. Like if you're operating for an artist you don't know, or an artist that you do know who's got a new edit of a song. Like it happens sometimes that you just, like, it's not going to be the one that you know. And that's kind of the joy of operating live, I guess, is that there will be things that catch you by surprise, and having something that is either bigger than what you last did, or in case it just keeps going, being able to adapt within a beat and not think about where you are, just go, okay, cool, we're doing this now. Don't know if I've necessarily answered the question there. Bump keys.
I did have one for you as well, which was just,
okay.
You have those bitmap boxes drawn around all of those layouts. How
Yeah.
extensively are you using bitmaps in your show?
I've experimented with bitmaps for a while. At the moment, I'm using them on these purple keys. So that's just so that at any point I can do color sweeps to whatever is set in my bump page. So if I bump to blue, they will go to blue. I also have they are yeah, so I'm mainly using them for those. I did do a bunch of other stuff. Let me see if I have it on a view. Yeah, so I have an engine, so each I did put a bunch of stuff in here so I could just kind of all doing circle stuff, but I never got it to look the way that I'm happy with. So
Stand by for a second again. We had another quality drop.
okay.
It's coming back slowly. It's kind of funny because Skype like resizes the NDI feed as it goes. All right, we're back.
Cool, we're back. So yeah, I did make this whole sort of it's kind of very much the same kind of style of programming as the color pickers and stuff, but just for bitmaps. And I found that a lot of the stuff you do kind of looks the same. And I don't know if it's just that my content's bad or whatever, but I prefer to do more predictable effects than the bitmap engine lets me do. And that probably just means my content's wrong. But again, I didn't spend a lot of time on it. Like this, I mean, I clearly spent a lot of time designing silly buttons, but as to actually implementing it, I mean, they all kind of look very similar. They come out from the center, and there's an uppy downy one, and it's kind of fun. I've been playing with it, but I don't depend on it for my show. I mean, that's the message there, is that it's like it's cool, but if you can do it another way, it's probably better to do it another way.
Sure.
Yeah, zooms with the bitmaps. Good idea.
I mean, shit. There's a lot of play you can do with bitmaps that I haven't gotten into.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain situations where it's going to be really useful. Like if I have a huge amount of LED product, like if it's an EDC circuit grounds or something like that, and there's just LED sticks for miles, then yeah, I'm going to bitmap that stuff. And maybe I'll do something custom for it. Maybe I'll spit out some new content. Like I use black and white, just loops, and maybe I'll do something with that. This little guy, actually, the spinning X thing looks really good on big sort of arrays of LED. But yeah, I generally don't use them in my show apart from for color effects. Like this stuff just sweeps, because it's a real quick way of doing it, especially since I have it drawn in a layout for me. It means I just don't normally think about it. I just push the buttons and they work. Did I answer the question? Let me see. So really, one key. It sounds like you were just going to one predefined look that just gives you time for transitions. Not so much a predefined look, but yeah, kind of. So it's like, again, these are sort of dimmer effects. They're not so much a look, because you could have them at different positions, or you could have them doing different pan tilt stuff. There are a certain amount of things like, so if I'm going to go to one of these pan tilt effects I have, like here, it will do some checking to see which lights I want to affect, which I turn on and off here. Set my size master to full, turn off my chases, and stop any movement effects, because I know that when I push this one button, I want it to start doing just that one thing. Or if I've selected here, just that one thing. I hope that makes sense. I'm probably not explaining it very well.
I don't think the content on the buttons made a huge amount of difference there. Just got a request to see the text a little larger is all.
Okay. I can go here. What exactly are we looking at?
I think just your tweak buttons. That was just the names on those guys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they just kind of they'll just change which effects, so which presets are being looked at by those effects. I think they just copy effects and merge them into place. Copy presets even, and yeah, I mean, you can make some cool looking stuff.
Dude, I mean, I've definitely got a lot of cool ideas in this file that I wouldn't have even thought of before. Like
I get bored a lot and take some long flights.
Just the way you've got it set up to like that the buttons on your right are completely changing like what your left hand is controlling. Not exactly that. I'm kind of saying it poorly, but I just love the idea of what you're doing with that. That is, and you are getting between some drastically different looks so quickly without any risk of not knowing what you're coming back to, which is the beautiful part of it to me.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Like, it's like I say, it's a process that worked for me. I've had really mixed responses from LDs who've had to run my file before, because it's kind of like there wasn't really a problem with the way MA was presenting things, but I realized quite early on that macros on a screen are cool, but macros on hard keys are awesome because they happen exactly when you want them to. So I just decided to make that, like, instead of just doing one thing, let's do many things when you push a button. Let's make it so that you have it yeah, like I say, just completely change everything, but in a predictable way. Um, and I ended up with a pretty good balance of, um, with it not being a 2-1 lucky, being able to modify, but being able to jump around quickly, and I guess between predefined states. And then there'll be
Yeah.
things that I'll do over the top, like, I don't know, just normal sweepy things, this sort of thing. Pulsing through different groups of strobes. That one's I have macros which will build up. You can't really see those in 3D, but sometimes you'll have 3 groups of strobes. Sometimes you'll have 4 groups of strobes. Sometimes you'll have 1 group of strobes that you'll want to split into smaller groups so that when you're pushing like strobe bumps, it's like it's going to go between the two. And I have some macros that sort of generate those queue stacks, which aren't particularly complicated. They just go to an effect and store it in a queue and update the sequence so that everything will just kind of work. I use those in timecode quite a lot so that either strobes or like these sort of this group's just called sixes where I'm just like da, 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 da. And the important thing when you're recording that in timecode is to set the record mode to go instead of go to, because if you change the number of steps in the queue, you don't want it to only play the first 2 or the first 3 queues.
Right.
If that makes sense. So in the timecode, it will have it set to go instead of go to, it'll say go.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. What else was I going to show?
Oh, did we just lose you completely? Come on, not right now. Okay, there you are.
Cool. So yeah, having another hard key down here, so kind of fun when you're playing with. One thing I like to do in a lot of my shows is that I'll flirt with asymmetry and then bring it back. So if I split my effect like that, so it's all kind of going around that way, and then I have a flip button which will just make it go the other way, and that can work quite well. If you're like, I always like to mess with asymmetry and then just bring it back to symmetry so that you kind of got some stuff that, yeah, the thing for me with asymmetry is it should look intentional, not accidental.
Right, it shouldn't look like you forgot to update your positions.
Yeah. Or like or that you don't know how to do symmetry.
Or yes, that.
Yeah.
Dude, there's some awesome stuff. I will definitely be I think this is the first time I've actually like been excited about some new lighting ideas in a while, just with all the time spent in quarantine lately. I say quarantine, just kind of us not having jobs anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like I'm happy to help and to be involved.
Cool. I'm not seeing a ton
really,
more questions. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
We didn't really cover Reaper, but I think that's been covered in enough videos already. I use it quite heavily to for playback and for programming. So I'll do a bunch of markers here, and then they'll become cues on the MA. I did start using a new plugin recently, which does like a live link from the MA to Reaper, which updates in real time, which is really cool, but causes problems if you decide to change Reaper files. Say I've got 2 open here, and if it's taking a live link, it might wipe out all your queues. I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah, that new plugin's pretty cool. It's called Timecode Mate, I think. It was really
Sounds
fun.
Right. Cool, yeah, and but like you said, there are so many videos out there on Reaper, or at least I think there are. I could be mistaken.
There's a few. I mean, I think I managed to. I was using, I think of course that Reaper markers to MA macro kind of generator thing before that. I just started using the Timecode Mate on a new project. What's really cool for that is like, because if you do happen to have a console or MA hardware, you can then put hard keys on here which control Reaper. So I have Reaper controlled by these. Let me show this other angle. I have it controlled by these 2 Streamdecks usually, and I'll have it sort of populate all my cues on here so I can just jump around If I show you that one, so yeah, if I this is kind of a really handy sort. So this will just like jump around in all my queues, populate some of the names, so I can say, all right, I want to go straight back to here and handle playback and things like that. So I normally just use Streamdeck for that. But having it on the console as well means that yeah, I don't have to come away from the console. I can just have a button fix that's like, okay, play, rewind, go to Q1, go to whatever, and it will jump around in Reaper and make sense of it.
Right, which is awesome, especially dealing with timecode stuff and having to navigate quickly.
For sure.
Well, if I have not, yeah, it's gonna be live on YouTube probably as soon as we end the stream. And yeah, I'm not seeing anything else new. So I'm kind of thinking we're at a good spot to close this out if you feel the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And it looks like we've got a few thank yous in the comments for you sharing your knowledge with us today. I, like, as I have already said, I am pretty tickled with some of the tricks that you've shown off today, because just a lot of stuff I wouldn't have thought of, or that I maybe wouldn't have thought would be worth the time, that after just watching you just noodle through it, definitely am proved otherwise.
Cool, thanks, man. Yeah, always happy to share. And yeah, like, love the work you do, love the plugins, love everything. It's great. So yeah, I realize that a lot of my stuff is kind of specific to EDM, but yeah, there's applications in a few other places. I'm excited to see, like, yeah, excited to see what you come up with.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of like doing this kind of thing to me, is like just bringing people in from different angles, because depending on the kind of show you're running, the way you're going to want to approach it is going to be completely different. Obviously, what you're doing doesn't really apply to somebody doing theatrical programming, right?
Unless it's a really awesome theatrical show.
Yes, but like, obviously for other people doing EDM that are going to be in similar festival situations to you, this is a very, very helpful approach. So yeah, I'm hoping we'll get to keep seeing some new angles as we bring more people on here. So thank you again for sharing with us, and thanks everybody who tuned in to watch it.
Thank you.
We'll catch you all later. And all right.